Okay, the first thing we want to talk about is the general way you lay out your studio. Setting up your studio in a way that makes it easy, fun, and functional to work in will make your recording experience far more creative and productive. It's a huge drag to have to stop and figure out something technical when you're right in the middle of creating a tune and your ideas are flowing. Almost every musician I know who has their own studio has this problem. The main thing you're trying to do when you're recording is to capture your ideas quickly and easily as they happen, and also record them in a way where the quality or tone properly conveys your artistic ideas. Most people think you have to pay a lot of money and go into a big expensive studio to do this, but the technical progress of the last decade has made it much easier and far less expensive to get professional results out of your home studio. Now often, especially if you're driving your car or doing something other than sitting in your studio, it's a good idea to carry a small recording device like a micro cassette recorder to quickly capture any ideas that come up. I've read and heard about countless occasions where big-name tunes were started on a napkin, a small recorder, or even by calling an answering machine and leaving a message of a song idea. If you have a song idea and you're afraid of losing it, you can use some of these methods to capture it. This way you don't have to run in and fire up your studio every time an idea pops up. Now let's look at some basic ways audio signal is going to flow in your studio. Now if you're wondering about MIDI signal flow, it's very similar to the way audio signal works and is also discussed in greater detail in section 11. We'll also go into greater detail about signal flow in section 4 as well. So let's look at this diagram. Basically you're going to start with some kind of source. It's going to be your vocals or your guitar, bass, synthesizer, something like that. It's going to go into a preamplifier, and I'll be showing you how I set up my studio to make this as easy as possible to work with. Next it goes into sometimes into some kind of processing. I don't like using processing myself. I'd rather compress inside my digital audio workstation and EQ inside my digital audio workstation as well. Next we go into our recorder, which in my case is a digital audio workstation. And after that we go into a mixer. Now with a digital audio workstation, your recording environment and your mixing environment are integrated into one box. Of course, last on the list, we got to be able to hear what we're working on. For that, you either use speakers or headphones, depending on whether or not you're just mixing, or if you're tracking, you're going to be using headphones so you don't get feedback. Also from your mixer, you're going to be delivering your final product, which is going to be usually a CD or an MP3. So next, let's look at some basic ideas about how to lay your gear out. If you look at big, expensive studios, you see a lot of similar concepts about where gear should go to make recording and mixing as easy as possible. Now you might look at some of these pictures of expensive studios and say, well, that's great, but I don't have that kind of money. No problem. The main objective here is to give you inexpensive ideas on how to get the same results. Now more and more people, even at the top of the industry, are using digital audio workstations to do their music productions. I think this is a great idea. This is an inexpensive and excellent way to work. The main reasons are digital audio workstations give you great sound quality, high track count, they're really easy to use as well. There's far less cabling and setup time, and it's also really easy to recall songs. You could double-click on a song and it'll pull up your mixer, your reverbs, your delays, your EQs, and now even synthesizers as well, so they really simplify music production. Next, let me show you the layout of my studio and give you some ideas about how to set up your studio. Now in my particular studio, this is a pretty high-end personal project studio, but I did work in professional studios, so I got some really good ideas from high-end studios about how to lay this one out. So what you're seeing here is a basic top view of my studio, and the mix position is where you've been seeing me sit during this entire video. You can see I have my work surface, or my digital audio workstation, right in front of me, and that's right in the stereo listening position. Now all the pink stuff you're seeing at the top of the screen, or the front of my room, that's bass trapping, and that has to do with acoustics. We're going to be covering a lot of that in section 14, which is called The Big Secret. Next, you can see right off to the right-hand side of where I sit and mix, you see my keyboard and my preamps. Really easy to get to, so when I plug in my guitar or my bass or my vocal, I plug right into the preamp, and that goes down to the back of the room, actually into the equipment rack. That's where I have the interface for my, in this case, I'm using a Pro Tools system. So I have my interface for the Pro Tools system in the equipment rack, but the computer and all the noisy gear like the hard drives and stuff like that are out in my machine room. That keeps all the noise out of my room, so my room is really quiet when I'm recording. Now this layout right here has worked really well for me. Also, I'm really lucky because a friend of mine is a studio designer, a very high-end studio designer, and he helped me put this together. He said it was one of the best project studios he'd ever seen. Now you might have a room that's shaped differently and you need to put a band in it as well. I wanted to give you some basic ideas and some basic suggestions about how to set up your studio. Now one thing I'd like to specifically point out is the way I have my computer monitor set up. I have this tilt monitor cart that lowers the computer monitors and angles them upward. This is a great way to work because it's very easy on the neck, so I could work long hours without any fatigue. Also, it doesn't get in the way of my acoustic monitors, my audio monitors, right? I have the keyboard laid out here. It's really easy to get to. I don't have to lean over. I don't have to stretch to get to anything. It's right here. Now, most of the time in my studio, I'm sitting right here with a guitar on. Sometimes I'll stand up and walk over here if I need to get my energy going. But a lot of the times, I'm sitting down with my guitar in my lap, and I'm writing songs, piecing them together, hitting play, hitting record, things like that. This kind of studio setup makes it really easy for me to work. Now, you might be a MIDI guy. You're using a keyboard like I have over here all the time. So you might take your keyboard, put it right here, take your computer keyboard, put it right on top of your MIDI keyboard, put your whatever you're using to adjust your listening level. I'm using a StudioCom here. You might be using a small mixing board. I'm doing all my mixing inside of Pro Tools, so I just need to adjust my listening level with this particular device. So once again, if you're doing MIDI, you might have your keyboard right in front. So right in the stereo position of your studio is where your keyboard is. Once again, whatever you're doing most in your studio, you want to have your stereo listening field positioned around where you're working. And you want to make it comfortable. You notice here, it's very easy to look at my computer monitor. It's very easy to get to the keyboard. I could pull it up if I want. The mouse is right where I need it. It's not straining me to be in the studio for long hours. And when you start working in your studio and having a good time, you will spend hours and hours in your studio, but it's a fun thing. Another thing I want to talk about is good cabling. It's really important to use high quality cabling. Now, this particular cabling I'm using here is what you'll find in most professional studios. The basic message here is to use really, really high quality cables. Most of the time in professional studios, you're going to find them using either Mogami or Canary cables, but there are other really good brands out there. What you want to avoid is going into the music store and buying the cheapest cable you could find. That type of cable usually will break down pretty quick. It won't make it past its warranty. You'll plug something in and you'll be trying to debug something going, why isn't this working? Where's this audio signal? This kind of stuff will drive you nuts. In my opinion, it is well worth spending a little extra money on high quality cables. It'll be one less thing you have to worry about, and high quality cables will deliver high quality recordings as well. Also, take good care of your cables. I've had a lot of my cables for over 10 years because they're good quality cables, and I take care of them. I wrap them up right and throw them in their box when I'm done and pull them out and they're ready to go. So those are a couple general ideas about how to lay out your studio. One last thing I'd like to mention is I also have 2 preamps right where they're very easy to get to, and I use those a lot as well. I can easily reach over and adjust the level. I can see the meters on them. Once again, laying out your studio in a way that makes sense will make it really fun to work in your studio. So the next section we're going to talk about is preamps, and let's move over to that.